Hello, I'm Toycat, and we are witnessing the biggest political earthquake the UK has ever seen, and I want to talk to you about exactly what it is, because in 2019, we had a Conservative majority, a big one, with the Labour Party being second, and in 2024, the Labour Party got an even bigger majority, one of their biggest ever, with the Conservatives being second, which might convince you that we have a two-party, or two-party plus system in the UK, but actually, looking at the opinion polls, you can see this just isn't true. We have lots of parties that are now gaining significant vote shares, and even at the last election, a huge number of people voted for a third, a fourth, and arguably a fifth and sixth, etc. party. What exactly is going to happen at the next election? Well, we can look at opinion polls. A lot of people poo-poo opinion polls, saying, oh, you're just going to ask people what they think, and yes, that is how elections are held, but especially people don't like that it's small sample sizes, because what if it's skewed by the people you ask that day, or what if they don't tell the truth? But MRP polls are really clever, because it's a multi-level regressional poll. It polls a far larger number of people, so you can actually apply the data not just to the nation as a whole, but to each individual constituency based on which ones have more young people, more old people, more self-employed or unemployed, more Cornish or Scottish. You can use that information to then work out what the result should be if an election were actually held, and the current result, if one were to be held tomorrow, is that Reform would win 180 seats, with Labour and Conservatives joint second in 165. The two parties that have led every government for the last 100 years would be second and third, with a new upstart party, which currently has, just to count them right here, 5 seats, or currently, well, it won 5 seats at the last election. They actually currently have 4 seats, fun fact, but the party which has 4 seats would jump up to being the national winners with 180. Even more shockingly, in a country where you need to get a majority of parliament, it's not weird presidential systems here, in a country where you need the majority of public opinion, you need to get 2 of these 3 parties to work together. Here is what the parliament would look like. No one of the biggest 3 parties could govern without consent of one of the other 2, and that would lead to a hugely interesting parliament. But today I want to talk about what this would actually mean for the UK, and how this is going to have to change everything about how the parties as a whole do govern themselves. So first things first, even though we had an election in 2024, we could hold one anytime. It's just wildly unlikely. When you get a huge majority, and even if you just have a minor one, it just doesn't make sense to hold an election, because the only way basically to change is downwards. You can have an election whenever, but the Labour Party has no interest in doing so, and there's an argument for, government continuity, that actually you don't want it to change. You want to have, the Parliament serve out its full term whenever that makes sense politically, and so far it will. And so this is kind of a discussion about what will happen in 4 years' times. A lot of things will change before then, particularly if Reform continue to lead the UK. There is this fun thing where right now Reform and the Conservatives are nearly evenly split, whereas if an election were to be held and you knew that one of those parties was slightly leading the other, you might be more inclined to say, screw it, I don't care which non-Labour party I get, I just want to have party that isn't in government, that is more right-wing than them, or maybe the right-wingness doesn't even matter to you, but you just want not that party in government, and so you're willing to vote for whoever will kick them. And right now, it is very evenly tied between Conservatives and Reform, but as you can see from the polls, although Conservatives have led Reform for a while, for a little bit recently, it's become very close to tied, with Reform just about edging them out in every single poll. And so this is the interesting thing that could happen with these vote shares. Let's talk about all of them today. So even if there was to be an election tomorrow, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it into Paint. I don't know what's happening here. Sometimes I feel like someone else is using my computer to make a different type of YouTube video. Okay, so if we look at the implied national vote share, there's a really interesting, I guess actually what we need to do is we need to make this a little bit smaller, and then down there, and then we need to take this entire section and make it bigger. We need more space to make these things go up. So the easiest thing to do is if the 2 parties that are on the right wing of the political spectrum in the UK could come together, all they have to do is somehow convince their voters to vote for the same people, and look at that, it goes literally off the charts that you'd have 48% in a combined alliance. And so if these 2 parties were ever to merge, even if they both lost a third of their voters as a result, they would still be by far the largest party. Additionally, something else that could happen were an election be held under these circumstances today is that the Labour Party, in the same way that both the Conservative and Reform Party would be desperately begging the other party's voters to vote for them instead. Like, please, don't vote. If we vote this way, we split it 3 ways and Labour might get in, because Labour wants them to be, again, right now, at 24%, no governing party should ever be able able to hold on to any seats. 24% should be a wipeout, and in fact, if we look at 2022, 23% was enough to be a wipeout. In fact, almost exactly 24. 24% is when you just have your party's core supporters. The Labour Party doesn't have many friends right now, but as a result of the election, they could say, look, do you want to have a right-wing coalition, or do you guys in the Green Party, do you want to come over here and give us the majority we need? And getting up to 32% would make a huge, or even if it's like they get up half of that, becoming the biggest, largest party by taking any number of these voters could be a huge win for them. And what's even more interesting is when we talk about right-wing parties in the UK and left-wing parties, we say, oh yeah, it's the Labour on the left and then the Conservatives on the right and then Reform to the right of those, but the Liberal Democrats are kind of a wild card too. 13% of the vote is shocking that when we are becoming polarized into a three-party society, where if we look at the election map, what would be traditionally rural Conservative seats have split between Reform and Conservatives. And in effect, you basically have what I might describe as the rural vote splitting in two. Rich places like Richmond and Northallerton, look, it's literally got rich in the title, the places that have done quite well from the last 14 years, or at least not poorly, are like, ah yes, the Conservatives, I might not agree with everything that they do. What that Boris Johnson fellow was saying was not what I would like to say to get things done, but by God, the Conservative, you know, that's what they would say. Whereas there are seats like, I'm from Doncaster, I'm not going to do the accent every time, but I've got to commit now, I've done it. Yeah, the Labour Party, they've been proper scum, in it. I don't know what accent this is at all, I'm sorry, I'm backing away from this. But people in Doncaster might say, you know, actually, yeah, the Conservatives have not been very good for us either. We don't like the Labour Party, and so what is a good alternative? The Reform Party. Effectively, yeah, the right-wing, the traditional right-wing seats have split, with an even more shocking gain for places like Wales. There are lots of gains from Labour in Wales, for example. There's lots of gains from Labour in places like Essex, in my opinion. They're sort of places that are very working class, but have this little element of like, yeah, actually, places that traditionally might not be quite ready to make the shift from, Labour to Conservative, might make the shift from Labour to Reform. On a political spectrum level, that's insane. The political spectrum in the UK looks something like this, if you're curious. If we measure this as being our political spectrum, which we just will, I shouldn't put it there though. Let's put our political spectrum over here. So the political spectrum looks like this, with this being the center up here, right? You could broadly describe us as having a Labour Party, which describes themselves as centre-left. In reality, it moves by leader. You can get some slightly further left leaders with, Jeremy Corbyn. You can get some slightly further to the right leaders, like Tony Blair or Keir Starmer, the ones who tend to win elections. But whichever way around you want to say it, you've got, okay, they're slightly left of centre. Maybe we could put them just, there to keep things simple. Then we've got the Conservative Party, which are to the right of centre. Again, if you are the Daily Mail, you'll describe them as left-wing nonsense. If you are a left-wing voter yourself, you describe them as literally the second coming of the German man from the 1930s. But in reality, they govern somewhere along the spectrum. I'll put him over here for now. Centre-right is pretty solidly where they have to stay, because to their right, we have the Reform Party. The Reform Party is sitting what you might describe as traditionally conservative, not watering it down to appeal to centrist voters, just saying this is how it is. And then we've got the Yellow Party, which is, again, interestingly also shifts based on their leader. They have a lot in their party that might find themselves to the left of the Labour Party, but they also have a lot that would probably appeal somewhere over here. Now, if you look at the two parts, and then we got the Green Party just hanging out over here. Now, if we look at the way that most elections have been held recently, most people vote for one of these parties, I guess. This has kind of been the Overton window of UK politics, you might say, and so people have voted for either the red or the blue, or if they're in between, or they have characteristics of one or the other, or if they want something else, they'll vote for the yellow. The easiest example of this would be if we look at the polls, the sorts of places that would still hold on, like Richmond Park, Epsom and Ewell, Dorking and Hawley, places that are, that have what you might say is the sort of high compassion Labour voters that also are doing wealthy enough to think, oh, those Labour people might take everything from me. They don't see my success as being a win. They see it as a crime against me. One day I aspire to live in, one day I aspire to be a Liberal Democrat voter who's like, I want to see the world made better, but also I am wealthy enough to worry about it in that way. So if you look at it's basically wealthy suburbs of London and the southwest that the Liberal Democrats do well in. This is the reason why, even with 13%, also like weirdly super far north Scotland, including the Shetland Islands of all places. But what's really interesting is the fact that there's a few other, they have a few other random dotted seats around because they campaign very locally. They worked out a long time ago that as the third party, we basically have to become the local party. In the same way that, by the way, I just want to show you the craziest thing. There is a green seat, Waveney Valley. I didn't realize this till the map. It's a green hold, which means they won this at the last election. And if you look into Waveney Valley, it's rural, what is that? Rural Norfolk. Actually, rural Norfolk and rural Suffolk. And what's interesting is if you look at the constituency profile, it's strong right. They have strong support for Brexit. Hopefully strong support for breakfast if they own their own homes. But they also are very right-wing on the economic and social views. And so it's a very interesting situation where there is a strong right-wing seat that is voted for, the Conservative and Reform vote split so bad the Green Party managed to take it. What sense does that make? The answer is we live in a weird world where politics shifts so much based on the local politician, which is what the Liberal Democrats traditionally have campaigned on. And so this is now something where instead of, people have now started to see it not as the two-party elite that you want to vote against, so you vote for the third party. Now it's the three-party elite. For so long we voted for these three parties, and what have they done? And so more people, to a smaller extent, the Green Party's getting something too, but way more people are starting to vote for the Reform Party. Oh no, my green square. Where'd it go? Bring back the green square. Oh, okay, green square's gone. It's the Labour view of the electorate. So basically now this has become the window of who people are willing to vote for. And within that window, the Conservatives are starting to get squeezed in the middle. Do you start to target, as the Conservatives party, you can either attack the Liberal Democrat vote share or you can attack the Reform vote share. But by attacking either, you probably are going to alienate the other. Whereas, for Labour, it's easy. Like, as the furthest left major party, you just have to not lose voters to the Green Party and hopefully cannibalize some from the disaffected Conservatives or Lib Dems who have moved or whatever. For Reform, it's really easy. You just have to be right-wing in a popular way, which is, to be fair, it's hard to sell it to people. I looked at their manifesto recently. Here is the Reform manifesto. It's got Nigel Farage putting it, which by the way shows the entire system here, but he's putting his phone away into his pocket. Very smart to do in London. He will get it stolen otherwise. And then if we look at the Liberal Democrats, it's him having a tea, it looks like, with an Asian family somewhere in, I assume, wealthy South England. The sun is shining, it's not Scotland, is all I'm saying. But what you can see here is that, this is the way the Liberal Democrats want to present themselves in one image. This is the way the Reform Party. They're like, I am a serious man who gets things done, and it's like, I'm going to make the country a better place, one cup of tea at a time, but what's interesting is, the two, what we really have is a fracturing of the major two parties down to 48%, and everyone else is trying to work out how they can capitalize. So, before we come back to this point, I just want to raise the point that the SNP would have a huge gain in Scotland. They basically got, semi-wiped out of the last election, but if every other party is fighting as the only Scottish nationalist party, I don't count the other one, but as the only major Scottish nationalist party, they would win a large number of seats. And in a similar vein, a lot of seats would start to get split between two parties fighting and another one just being able to jump in there. And so this is where both the Liberal Democrats and Reform kind of want to be the logical third choice to jump in there. The Liberal Democrats, but what's interesting is they have basically polar opposite manifestos. If you want not one of the major two parties, you effectively have two choices, and there's a lot of people choosing. If we look at Reform, their biggest pledge is on smart immigration, not mass immigration. So what they say is we need to freeze non-essential immigration, raise the employer tax on immigrants to 20%, bar student dependence. I don't know that that's real. I feel like if student... I feel like you always hear about people talking about people bringing, students bringing their parents with them on a student visa. I feel like there's no way that is actually true, and if it is, I feel like that. But it's the sort of thing like this, where it's like, this is their campaign from Reform, whereas if we look at the Liberal Democrats, immigration is their, 18th biggest concern, and if we read their immigration powers, or if we just read their policy, they want a fair, effective immigration system that treats everyone with dignity and respect. Whereas Reform wants to raise the taxes on immigrants. They want to freeze non-essential skills, so just healthcare, because in the UK, healthcare is the one sacred sheep that you cannot kill, no matter which party you are, no matter how far right you are. Don't you dare say anything bad about the NHS if you want to win those Essex seats. But yeah, if you look at this, you can see like, okay, generic stuff about slashing government waste, raise the. But what's interesting is the number of policies here. The most expensive one would be the idea of actually lifting income tax start points. Instead of targeting wealthier people, this is what the Conservatives did with Liz Truss and maybe collapsed entirely over. Instead, Reform are like, okay, yeah, you shouldn't pay any income tax till 20,000, and the higher rate should begin at 70,000. In effect, most people should pay 20%, but only after a bit. This would be a huge cut to taxes. This would basically, it would slash the government revenue by a huge amount, which is something you can easily say as a non-party of government. And the same thing is true for, if we look at the Liberal Democrats, I don't see the word taxes in here. I see the word economy, and it says enable people and allow businesses to thrive. But if we look into it, you can see there's basically no real, like there's a tax rise on digital giants and on buybacks on shares, but they make no claims to any tax cuts. And I think, interestingly, in the modern state of the economy, you probably do get most people, especially right of center voters, saying that the biggest thing that matters for them is immigration or is taxes. You know, we're being taxed too much for what we're getting, etc. And so how will that go? The answer is that this is the vote share that is implied, and that if an election were held tomorrow and no parties were able to campaign, we would get this result. But in reality, we're going to see either the Conservatives convince people that, look, you don't actually want to vote Reform, you just want to hurt us, but you want to hurt the Labour Party more, so they're going to yoink away some of their vote share. Let's just take some of that over here. Or the reverse could happen. If Reform leads for a long enough period of time, they will convince Conservative voters who maybe don't like the way they talk about immigration or don't like the way they talk about energy or anything else. Like, okay, let's hold our nose and vote for the big right-wing party, even just for now. To be fair, it could also lead to the same thing happening to the Liberal Democrats. Again, you could see you could literally see the Conservative Party fracture in two, with some Conservatives going. You could see basically the dissolution of the party, because if people don't believe the Conservatives are going to win, then the Conservatives cannot win. The Conservatives' biggest benefit as a party of former government is that people believe that they will likely be the second biggest party at the next election. Once that belief is shattered, so too does their party. Similarly, though, the Reform Party needs to manage to hold an election campaign without a giant blunder. I mean, if we look at, again, they have 5 MPs. One of those MPs is suing the rest of them, and as far as I can tell from my very brief understanding of the right-wing YouTube scene, is that actually younger people really agree with this guy over these guys. Nigel Farage is the more traditional conservative. This is the more, spicy conservative. He's backed by, he's backed by Elon Musk, of all people, bizarrely. It's a really, really interesting thing here. And so, as a result, the biggest factor would be in the lead up to an election. Could Reform UK convince people they are a viable party of government, and crucially, more viable than the other ones? Whereas Labour, what they want is they want this to be a perfectly balanced fight, because all they need to do is convince any number of Lib Dem voters, just take 1% of the Lib Dems, take 1% of the Green Party, maybe even take 0.5% from the SNPs or the Independents. If they could just do that, then somehow they could take what should be a wipeout election result. Less than 1 in 4 people wanting to vote for them, they could turn that into a result where actually they are the largest party, the kingmakers in a parliament. And will that happen? Well, I think the interesting analysis that comes directly from More in Common here is, simply put, that right now, they risk losing their seats in their traditional headlines, and right now, in short, this model points to a UK political system that is more fragmented than at any time in history. The first past the post system is having challenges it has not faced before, and I think that the logical answer to this is, if you think that this is how people actually want to vote, if we have a political spectrum that is genuinely fractured to this extent that we haven't seen before, let's just put the Greens and the SNPs on here just to be fun, if we have a political system where actually all of these parties are going to do well in the respective areas that they are running in, well, then I think we should say, or maybe we could say, that now is the time that we should have an election system that matches those shares. Or if you're one of the two major parties, you should say, no, now is the worst time. It's our last hurrah for first past the post. And so Labour and Conservatives have a huge campaigning advantage until that is fixed. And so how would an election actually go? Maybe not like this, but the fact that it could ever go like this is something that should be a wake-up call for the two major parties. Even if, if you are a Labour voter who is like to the left of the party, you have to concede that your party needs to win over these guys, and these guys. Because there just aren't enough. Even if you win 100% of the SNP and the Green over, that's still not a majority. If you believe, if you are to the right of the Conservative Party, if you believe that, yeah, we actually need to be chasing reform, you also need to be chasing the comfortable suburban Liberal Democrat voters. And because, you know, if you look at all of the Liberal Democrat seats, they're basically gains from the Conservatives. At the 2019 election, the Liberal Democrats got almost wiped out in the two-party system. Well, it was actually 2015 because they went into coalition, but whole different point. As a result, as a Conservative, you need to be looking to gain both of those things. It's a very tricky task, I have to say, but it is what you have to do if you don't want to see the annihilation of your party. Whereas for reform, you can just keep vibing. You seem. I feel like somehow they are becoming more and more popular, and so they need to convince people they are actually able to govern by having fewer internal spats. Having more, I don't want to say unrealistic policies are in the manifesto, because let's be honest, every non-party of government has an unrealistic manifesto, but actually convincing people like, yeah, we have government spokespeople on these things, and we propose actual responses that make people go, oh, yeah, reform government is not just a protest vote, it is a vote for an actual, thing. And if you're the Green Party, then you've got to keep going to conservative constituencies and campaigning on, if you actually look into what Adrian Ramsey has done on his past, I don't know if we'll see it here, but in his action, even though he is a Green leader, so believes in quite left-wing politics, you might imagine, he's effectively become what you might describe as a NIMBY. There we go, allegations of NIMBYism. Literally because he believes that they shouldn't allow any energy to be constructed in his constituency, even if it's green energy, literally the thing for his party, because he wasn't elected on we need a better environment. His constituents probably hate net zero. He was elected on we won't build things here, and he is serving his constituents before his party, which is arguably what everyone should be doing. But then that creates a much more tricky conversation about this whole thing. And so for now, I'll just say I hope you all enjoyed this video. This can be my thumbnail. Let's add the little blue pin so that you know when you click it, it's me. And we actually have to. So here's a fun thing. If you want to know about the thumbnail creation process, it has to be 1280 by 720, or rather, it has to be 16 by 9. And so this thumbnail would not work as a thumbnail unless we make it way wider, which we could do, I guess. But yeah, so if you're in Paint and you want to make a thumbnail, we're going to set this to 720. 720, oh, it's linked. We're going to set this to 720, which means we now need to widen it even more over here, I guess we'll say. And there we go. Now we just move things around to make sure the space feels less dead. So that can go over here. And then I'll put a little shocked face in the left-right corner. So it'll be like, oh my god, what? Yeah, here we go. Look at that. Look at that. Okay, that's his mouth now. Yeah, that's the mouth, and then we'll draw two little eyes on there. Oh, yeah. Is that? Can I draw that? Just a reminder, I am Asian. By the way, if this is the first place you're hearing it from, the Pope is dead. My grandmother, my Sri Lankan grandmother from Asia, by the way. Therefore, if this is offensive, it's chill. But yeah, my Sri Lankan grandmother's so upset about that. She really liked the last Pope more than this Pope. This Pope's a little bit too progressive for her liking. She's I don't know how old she is, but she's a grandmother. So I should check on that. I know she's a lot younger than my grandfather. So probably 60. Wait, no. Logically, if my mother would be, she in her 70s somewhere, probably. I remember her turning 55. Man, isn't it crazy how time passes by? And we sit here staring at images of the Pope. Anyway, he was a bit too progressive, but by the end of his reign, she was like, actually, he is convincing people Catholicism is cool. I like this guy again. And yeah, isn't that fun? I hope you think it's fun, because this has been a good one. But for now, if you want to support weird political videos from your favorite elf, make sure to go to patreon.com/toycat. I use the money exclusively to buy fun things. No improvement will be made to the quality of this channel. And because of the USD GBP exchange rate, Wait, no. Because the dollar is collapsing in value, I get more dollars now than I did before. Yeah, so now is the best time, because if you've noticed, on YouTube you can actually choose to calculate your earnings and any income, or any currency. I always set it to dollars because that's how I measure everything in my business. So yeah, more dollars for me. It means fewer kebabs though. I guess I could go to America and get some kebabs. Where's the best kebab in America? That's the real question that I'll leave this video on, and which of these major political parties can answer it for me? Let's find out. But for now, thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. I'm going to put a big red thing there so it looks intentional. Is that the last artifact? Yeah, actually, let's make it a big red arrow going down, and then we'll make like a blue arrow that's going. We'll make a light blue arrow that's going up. And then that'll be what the shocked face is reacting to. Yeah, art with Toy Cat. Okay, second channel, don't care. Bye.